Hello, everyone, and welcome to Future Strong. I am Lindsey Pollak, and we are a little bit different today, as many of you have noticed. The UK time is different, anyone who works with Europe, so we are at 11 o'clock Eastern time, and we're delighted for all of you who are joining us. You might also notice that Nicky Garcea is sadly missing today. Unfortunately, like much of the world, I think she is under the weather with one of the bugs that are sadly going around. But I am so delighted to be with all of you. Please, as always, introduce yourselves in the chat. Let us know that you're here. I see Mike Summers kicking us off, our good friend Mike from Lafayette College in Easton, Pennsylvania, which Zohra is my dad's alma mater. So Mike is a good friend and supporter. I am Lindsey Pollak. I am the author of 4 career and workplace advice books. I am also a keynote speaker and a very proud ambassador for Capfinity. Capfinity is one of the world's leaders in identifying and hiring and retaining talent through strengths and skills. And we're going to talk a lot about that today with our guest. So without further ado, I'm excited to introduce you to Zohra Yafai. Yafai.
Yafai, you've got it. You got it.
Okay, Zohra Yafai. Thank you very much. Lindsey Pollak, as I said, I always get people mispronouncing my name, so thank you for bearing with me. Zohra is the VP of Talent at Cisco, and we had the opportunity to connect because Cisco very generously invited me to attend their WebEx open house, which some of you may have seen. I shared on LinkedIn some of the experiences of their future of work activities and environment. Zohra, I would love to invite you to introduce yourself and let you know we have Mike from Lafayette College in Pennsylvania. We have our friend and Capfinity colleague, Trudy Steinfeld from Cambridge, Massachusetts, Tahani from Bloomington, Indiana, and we have Mary Scott from West Hartford. Please continue to introduce yourselves. And Zohra, I'll turn it over to you. Tell everybody about your role and how you came to the talent acquisition world.
Thank you, Lindsey, and hi, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today. As Lindsey shared, my name is Zohra Yafai, and I currently reside in the beautiful San Diego, California. You might be able to tell from my accent, though, that I'm originally from the UK, and actually before that from Kenya in East Africa. So I'm slowly making my way around the world. So who knows where I'll end up next, but I'm going to keep on going. I am the VP of Talent Acquisition and Internal People Movement at Cisco. So my role is anything to do with hiring people externally, and then also being able to move people within the organization to the parts of Cisco where we have the most critical need, and that is in immigration, relocation, as well as kind of like work-based, skills-based movement. And so I've been with Cisco for 15 years, the first 9 in London, and then got the wonderful opportunity to experience career growth and internal movement, immigration and relocation myself, when my boss at the time asked me to come to the US for, at the time, what was supposed to be 2 years, and 7 years later, a husband and a child. I have the joy of living in the beautiful San Diego area.
Wonderful. I'm so intrigued by your title. I don't think I knew the full title, Talent Acquisition and Internal People Movement. How did that title come about? I think that's really unique and says so much about where we are in the talent space right now.
Yeah, actually my official title, and this is why I end up like kind of explaining it, is Join and Connect, because that's what we felt like my organization should do. It should be, how do you join Cisco? And then how do you connect within Cisco in terms of your career and your next step? I think for a while now, we've been really intrigued by how we think about skills-based movement. We have, wonderful employees, and we were already doing a big chunk of our rec-based movement through internal hiring. And so we just started to make the decision in the last couple of years that we wanted to be more intentional about that and discover and learn more about that. So that's been my remit. I've been enrolled for about a year, but that's been my remit for the last year, is to really start to stand up that organization. We've really accelerated that work this year. So yeah, it is interesting, and I'm hearing a lot of other companies thinking about the same. So it's a great opportunity for us to really start to learn about a bit more about our own employees, but also just the people we bring into this organization. we're lucky enough in that Cisco is the kind of place where you want to stay. I've been here for 15 years. We have a lot of people that want to stay. And so let's be intentional and support that next step, right?
A lot of agreement in the chat, and sort of enjoying the term join and connect. That seems to be resonating a lot with people. We've also got Afsana has joined us, and our good friend Fred Burke from New York City. Zohra, for those who are not familiar with Cisco or the breadth of what Cisco does, I think a lot of us have Cisco phones in our office desks, or we know about the network. Can you talk about Cisco's sort of product offering now, and specifically how you're approaching hybrid work? Many people obviously use WebEx in their jobs. Just briefly, what do people know about the organization, or maybe what are the misconceptions about the company?
Oh gosh, the misconceptions, I think, for anyone based in the US is that we're the food company. So that's probably the number one question we get when we come to campus events, like, the food company? And we're like, no. So I will say, obviously you were at the WebEx One conference, which is wonderful. And our collaboration tools, I think, are what people know as four best. So telepresence, WebEx, the phones, and the evolution of that. I think has been a big part. I remember when I first started Cisco, we had the kind of like, in one of the offices, we had like the evolution of all of the kit from like the first phone all the way through to the telepresence unit at the time. I just remember thinking about how Cisco very much has kind of built the foundations of networking as we know it. The collaboration tools and kind of technology very much is focusing on the hybrid world and our ability to interact like this, but in many different ways all over the world, and the need for more connectivity and the need for more connection points, and then the ability to do that securely. And so security and making sure that those connections are trusted and tight, and again, banking systems and educational systems and all these really important things, healthcare systems run and flow through Cisco technology. And so the security element of what we do, probably people don't understand as much. It's not just about being able to use WebEx and the wonderful conferencing capabilities that we have and collaboration tools, but the underlying need for very secure connections, very intelligent, secure connections underneath that. It's probably the thing that people don't know about us as much.
So I find it really fascinating. You are recruiting talent in the hybrid work environment while also creating products and services for the hybrid work environment. So thinking of your role recruiting internally and certainly externally, we have a lot of people here from campus environments as well as all across talent acquisition and DEI. What keeps you up at night, Zohra, besides your 2-year-old?
Yeah, that was a 2 a.m. last night. That was great fun. I think it was funny. I had this exact conversation at the LinkedIn conference last week. I was on a panel with my counterpart at Ford. And we were talking a lot about, and for those of you listening that are talent acquisition professionals, just kind of how burnt out the profession is a little bit, because the last 2 years have thrown so many opportunities, but challenges, right? So I remember getting that call on March 9th, 2020 of everything shutting down. And how do we move everything into this kind of hybrid environment? And overnight, we had to reimagine all of our processes and our procedures and our policies around how we did everything, right? And fast forward, the COVID pandemic deepened, the need for hybrid work deepened, and then we really understood that, wait, people want to work differently. So this isn't a temporary thing. This is a permanent thing, and we have to start, kind of building and figuring out what that looks like. Then came the Great Resignation, and I don't think any team was immune from the impacts of that. And certainly my organization, we filled so many company record in terms of the number of requisitions last year, just keeping up with obviously the churn that high attrition kind of brought. And again, we were lucky at Cisco, our attrition was a lot lower than most companies, but still, we weren't as prepared for that, I think. So I think what keeps me up at night is what's around the corner, right? I think what we've seen is the opportunity for roles like mine and organizations like mine within a company to be solving more higher level challenges, more like, how does this workforce work? What is the temperament of the external market? So certainly we've noticed, for the better, a more strategic shift in the work that we do and the role that we play and the problems that we're trying to solve for. But that obviously comes with a little bit of pressure. And certainly, looking at high inflation environments and worries about the economic outlook, trying to help and guide the organization through what do we think that's going to look like. I would say that that's probably a little bit about what keeps me up at night. I will say, though, again, I'm maybe fortunate that I work in an organization where we very much have a listen, learn, try culture, right? So we will use data as much as possible to kind of predict where we think we're going to go. And then, we socialize as much as possible. We have a conversation about that. And then we pick a path and we go down it. And if in that going down that path, it turns out not to be the right thing, that's okay. We quickly realize that, we learn, we continue to listen, and we shift and we change. And I'm supported in that by my leadership. So whilst it keeps me up at night, it's not an unhealthy keeping me up at night. I do think I'm fortunate. And for those of you that are leaders out there, or kind of, manage teams, I think it's important at this time to reinforce that way of working, which is no one's got a crystal ball, no one can forecast the future. So let's work in a way that is agile, that focuses on learning and listening. And if we fail, it's okay, fail fast, and then move forward. Figure it out. I think that's going to have to be, very much the expectation of how we work going into the next few years as well.
I love that. Listen, learn, try. And we've had so many talent acquisition professionals on the show talk about how COVID in some ways gave them cover to be a little bit more experimental, right? And to say, well, this is an unusual environment. Let's try something different. And that there's been a lot of, certainly not all successes, but opportunities to pilot and create. I also noticed that you do not refer to campus recruiting. You talk about early talent recruiting and have some thoughts on not just recruiting talent on campus, using skills-based hiring, which is obviously very interesting to those of us who work with Capfinity. Can you talk about how you're thinking about early career talent and even hiring those without college degrees?
Yeah. It's another part of my organization where I have to explain the title. So we call it the team is traditionally called, I guess, kind of campus recruiting or university recruiting, other organization. We call it emerging talent recruiting. And what that means for us is absolutely, we contain many of the universities and college and campuses I see represented here. I know that we partner with, but we try to reduce as many of the barriers into those entry-level roles, because there is a recognition that skills, there's something you acquire and you can learn over time. And so we try to be as open and wide as possible as to where we think we can find those skills within Cisco, for Cisco. So about 40% of our job openings at that level don't actually have the requirement for a college degree. So obviously people with college degrees can apply, but people with a 4-year college degree can apply, a 2-year college degree can apply. But we really do try to encourage as much as possible, just thinking more broadly about talent and the type of talent that comes into our organization. We're a founding member of the 110 Coalition. So if anybody actually knows anything about 110, it has a goal to get 1 million African-American Black students into roles without a degree in the next 10 years. And so that's something, we're a founding member, our CEO is on the board. We are trying to ensure that through some of how we do our hiring, we're thinking very skills first, but that we're also being as aware as we can about the impacts from a kind of social justice perspective, from our DEI efforts as well. So it's something we're trying with, I'll tell you, there's a lot of things in that we are trying and we are learning, and we think something's going to have that impact. And then we look at the data and we're like, not as much, let's think about that a little bit. The 110 program is such a good example of that, where each and every place we've kind of looked and gone, there's not quite the conversion there. Why is that happening? We dig into it a little bit more, because we really want to focus on the outcomes of a more diverse workforce, but certainly a skills first way in thinking about that.
So reminder to the audience, please introduce yourselves if you haven't already. We also welcome your questions and comments. Please keep them coming. Zohra, it occurs to me that you are doing some things that are quietly quite radical. Can you talk a little bit? We have a lot of practitioners in the crowd. Can you talk about how you've been able to make some of these changes in a very big organization? How did you get buy-in from leadership for some of these initiatives? How do you train business leaders and interviewers? I would just love to hear some of the nitty-gritty of how this has all happened as much as you're able to share.
Yeah. That's probably the question I get asked the most is like, okay, great, sounds wonderful. How are you doing that? So I think I'd say two things. Number one, I'm again very fortunate to work in an organization where that comes from the top. So the ask for us to be thoughtful, the purpose of Cisco is to power an inclusive future for all. That is a very profound purpose for a tech company, and it allows me actually, as I'm talking to senior leaders or hiring managers, to be able to anchor into that statement, like how are all of our actions, because that's got to be embedded in everything we do. How are all of our actions powering an inclusive future for all? And it allows us to stop and think about that and not just do, hey, we've done this for 10 years, so let's just carry on doing it. But like, we have this really profound purpose statement now. And so how do we do that? So I'd say, number one is we very much get our kind of executive leadership team and our CEO. We take a lot of directions. I think we're lucky in that I feel like they're pretty radical, to be honest, in terms of some of the things they ask us to think about and ask us to kind of flip on its head and think very differently about. So I think we're really fortunate in that regard. I also think, people and hiring managers in particular, they want to do these things. They themselves don't know how. And I think we've got to kind of stop kind of putting it behind some sort of smoke and mirrors, like, well, this is how this is how we have an expectation, but we're not going to tell you how to do it. We actually did at Cisco roll out mandatory interviewer training through the social talent platform, which is a fantastic partner for us. And we asked and got an overwhelming, because again, it's a really good example, Lindsey, of where we listened to our organization and we asked the question. We asked hiring managers, like, how confident do you feel about this? Like, how confident do you feel about bias in the interview process? Or, and we got this overwhelming response of like, we don't actually feel that confident. We'd really like some training on it. That would be great. Thank you for asking. And so we were able to roll that out. We made it mandatory because that was important to us. Like, if you want to be part of our process, then if you want to interview, you don't have to be a hiring manager, but if you want to interview and choose the future of Cisco, then we really need you to be a participant in this. And we had a fantastic response. Okay, yeah, some people were like, gosh, another mandatory training, but most folks were kind of very excited about the opportunity to upskill themselves, to become better leaders, to become better interviewers. And so we're going to keep on that journey and teaching and learning our organization how to do this better, because it is hard. And those of us that work in talent acquisition or career services, we inherently have this language around skills taxonomy and development and growth and career laddering and job architectures and all these things. But actually, not everyone has that. And so we have to kind of make sure that we're, being really clear and honest about what that means. And how to be successful in that.
That's such a good point. Even the language that we use is not common to people who are not familiar with it every day. And I think it's really remarkable that your business leaders wanted this training and embraced it. I think that's fantastic. And I want to welcome our good friend Brian Quick from Abbott in Chicago. Brian is my peanut M&Ms dealer, and I wrote about him this week on my LinkedIn. So Brian, thank you for joining us. And a lot of phrases here are really resonating, Zohra. Join and connect is really resonating. Listen, learn, try. So thank you for giving us the language around some of this. I do want to speak to our career services audience, which is, what does this mean for them? How do they navigate a world where a company like Cisco is hiring 40% of your employees without college degrees? How do they pivot to this skills based?
Yeah. So I'd say we're not hiring 40% of our ETR talent without skills. We're just making available around 40. We're removing that degree requirement. So again, like, anybody, we're in no way going to say you have a 4-year college degree, sorry, you can't come here, right? Like, it is it is about just making sure that we're being as open and wide and fair as we can in the access to the job opportunities that we have. We partner with so many fantastic universities, campuses, career services all over the world. There will always 100% be a need for us to hire from, kind of schools and colleges and universities and all different types of higher education institutions. We hire thousands every year. And I think it's about our journey to learn and understand about that skills acquisition. Absolutely, for some careers, it starts in the university and then it continues in Cisco. And so how do we keep that going? For others, they come in through a different path. Cisco has the Network Academy. If anyone's familiar with the Cisco Network Academy, it's 25 years old. I think we've put about 17 million students around the world through Network Academy certifications. I think it's something like 28,000 institutions around the world. This is something we are deeply embedded in. And we have a real passion for higher education and support. So some of our Network Academies are actually at a lot of the universities that we hire from in the US and around the world. It's about a partnership, I think, at the end of the day, because as I see it in the 15 years that I've been at Cisco and in the 20 odd years I've been doing this thing, skills are evolving so rapidly, and we need that feedback loop with our academic institutions as well around what are the relevant skills. We do a lot of partnering on curriculum. Security curriculum is a really good example of an area where we partner with a lot of institutions to have that conversation about what are the skills that we need to drive a company like Cisco forward? What are the skills of the future? And then how are we teaching and training that? So I think that's always going to be a huge part of how we acquire talent, how we partner with higher education. We just wanted to be able to also provide opportunity to people that maybe don't have access to that path into roles where we don't necessarily require a 4-year degree. And I think, again, it'll be something that we listen to and we learn and we understand from. But so far it's looking really positive. I think there's, a lot of opportunity for us to learn even more as we go forward with that strategy.
That's terrific. Thank you. And if anyone has experience on your campus with the Network Academy, do let us know. We have a question from Mary Scott, who runs the Scott Resource Group, which is a research and consulting firm, primarily with Gen Z students and campus recruiting. She wanted you to speak in a general sense about a path maybe you tried that didn't yield the outcome you expected. So where did you listen, learn, try, and then pivot away from a particular decision? Would you share maybe a learning?
Yeah, gosh, that's a good one. I think sometimes it's maybe an underestimating the change management, I would say, is a theme. So, and again, Lindsey, just like you said, we have this language within our profession from talent acquisition or organizational learning or any of these different areas where we go, great, this is going to be a really great thing to do. This is where everyone else is going. All kind of indicators point to X. And then we go and try and land that within our organization and, or externally, and we underestimate where people are starting from. And so often I think where we've maybe tried and failed is we've failed to make it relevant to the problem that somebody else is trying to solve for, right? Like, great, that sounds great for you. How's it going to impact my job? How's it going to change my organization for the better? I've learned a lot in my career about connecting that dot better. And then the change management, I really believe in the fact you have to sometimes tell people things 4 times before it really resonates. People are busy. There's so much information coming at us. Lindsey and I were sharing about the different podcasts that we read, or the different articles that we read. I mean, there's audiobooks on X speed and whatever. And I think sometimes you have to create space for change. And knowing how to do that and not underestimating how much space you have to give for change if you really want it to be impactful. That's been certainly a learning I've had in my career, is it could be the best idea in the world. If you don't nail how to get that to land and how to make it relevant, I really do feel like it can kind of fizzle out, and good work can fizzle out. And I've seen that happen.
That resonates so much with me, creating space for change. Speaking of change, you are at the forefront at Cisco, a lot of very cool technology. We talk a lot about the future of work, and I think that can be a very broad topic, but I got to play with some of the tools. I walked into Cisco and there was a remote virtual receptionist who welcomed me and was able to show me where things were and how many people were in each room. That was a new experience. And you also have a lot of technology that I think is probably going to impact how we interview talent, how we do information sessions in the future. I know that Capfinity is doing a lot of work with artificial intelligence and virtual reality headsets for people to really understand what a job entails. Can you just talk a little bit about your vision of talent acquisition in the future? I think I said TA to someone, they're like, teaching assistant? I was like, no, talent acquisition. So we do have to mention our terms. You talk not just about the technology, but also the impact it has on the environment and how you've been making decisions with travel and recruiting. Can you just talk about sustainability and technology and maybe what you see the next 10 years or so looking like?
Absolutely. And I'm really glad you got to go and experience that. It's funny. We used to have we had those virtual assistants at the Cisco desk before the pandemic. So I'm really lucky again to be working for a company that's been trying these things out and trying to think about this work, in many ways before that. But I think, as you said, the pandemic kind of forced this, like, okay, overnight, March 9th, hey, we have to think about things differently. Okay. And I think at the time, it was just necessary to move everything virtual. And again, really lucky at Cisco, you can run a few thousand person webinar off the Cisco WebEx platform, right? You can do polling. We had so much features and capabilities that allowed us to make that transition pretty quickly. I know a lot of other organizations, academic institutions, it was hard, right, to make that transition. We were lucky we had all this technology at our fingertips. And the future of that, Lindsey, that you've been able to see, the holograms, telepresence, all these wonderful kind of tools and systems and equipment that we have that are coming, and I think have been driven largely, I think, by the need for being able to be functional in a hybrid world, because hybrid work is hard. It's really hard. It's not impossible. It's just different and it's hard. And so we have to dial in the right ways to get it right. And so, when I think about, okay, the pandemic is, kind of getting to a place where we're learning to live with it, right? And we have a bit of an opportunity on some things, right? It's a fork in the road here for us. Do we knee jerk and just go back to doing everything the way we did it before? Or do we say, wait, let's stop, try, listen, and learn, right? And try to think about a different way of what has to be that way. So I've been pushing my team pretty hard. Like one of the things I struggle with in going to these big conferences prior to the pandemic was the amount of single-use plastic, right? So water bottles created with company logos, those tote bags are notoriously terrible for the environment in terms of the carbon footprint they use to be created. I don't mind a pen. A pen's usable. Well, I'm like, yes, I can use a pen.
I got a cookie at the WebEx open house, so that was very sustainable.
Very sustainable. You can eat that. Hope it was a good cookie. So I think, I've been pushing my team really hard to be like, is this not just like, is this what we want to do, but is this what the candidates that we're trying to talk to, is this reflect Cisco? Because we have a fantastic new chief sustainability officer. She's driving us to think really differently and question and think about the impact that we have. And so I do think it's an opportunity for us to think really thoughtfully about how do we go back? How much travel do we do? How do we reduce our impact in terms of waste? And again, for anyone that's here from career services, I'd love to carry that conversation on, which is like, how do we make these events more sustainable? Because I was explaining to Lindsey, I just moved and I've got a bunch of boxes in my office here, and I'm pretty sure half of it is from corporate swag and all those sorts of things, and some of it's usable. But I think it's something we're going to have to think through what we do and how we do that in the future. It's just an opportunity for us to not just go back to how we used to do things in the past. But let's all collectively take a stop and think, like, is this the most sustainable way that we could be showing up?
I really appreciate that perspective. We talk about, should we be in person, should we not? But it's also everything that goes around being in person. It's the water bottles on the table. It's the swag. It's the electricity. It's the carbon through the travel, et cetera. So I think that's a really holistic way to think of it.
Yeah, and I think there's always going to be a place for in person, but it's when you do it. Do you do it and again, for talent acquisition professionals out there at the top of the funnel, a few thousand, or do you make the investment when you're looking at onboarding or final interview? I think we have to think about that as well, because that human connection, that face-to-face connection, it is important, and technology can absolutely supplement for a big chunk of that. But where we do that in the process as well, I think is something we have to be thoughtful about as we all look. I'm sure everyone out here has some sort of climate change or socially conscious targets that we're all working towards. I think it's just an opportunity just to come together and think about that.
I really appreciate your nuance. We often talk about campus or no degree. It's like, no, it's both, right? But when do we use each one? Is it in person or technology? It's both, right? But it's being much more thoughtful about when and how we deploy all of these different tools. I asked you what's keeping you up at night, but I also want to end on a positive note, which is, what are you most excited about? Which are the meetings where you get really jazzed? What are the topics that excite you? Where's your energy is in the talent acquisition space?
I will say, number one, yes, when I get to talk to anybody in our organization about the technology and the future, that just like you, I get so excited about that. I get so excited about the future of Cisco's technology and where that's going to take us. And I love those conversations. I also get really excited about the role of talent acquisition and anybody that's touching and caring for the careers journey, the skills journey, the learning journey, the next step journey. I got into this profession because I did an internship and I was able to offer somebody a job as part of that, right? I picked up the phone and I said, you got the job. And that overwhelming moment, it was a moment that mattered to that person so much. It's this overwhelming excitement and, oh my gosh, think about it yourselves, right? The different journeys that you've been on. So I'm really excited about doing more of that and being as more equitable in how we do that, and solving the problems, elevating the profession, I think, into this can really change the world, how we do this, how we provide access to jobs, how we skill our workforce. And how we create employees that really care about the purpose that we're trying to drive. So I'm really excited about that because that gives me a lot of energy. I take a lot of pride in that.
You just come alive when you talk about offering someone a job. I absolutely love to see that here live on camera. Yeah, that's wonderful. So Zohra Yafai of Cisco, thank you for joining us. I always end our episodes with a wrap up of 3 of the top takeaways of what you mentioned. Today, my first takeaway is that talent acquisition professionals are burned out, and they also have a tremendous opportunity to be more strategic, to be more experimental. And there was a lot of energy around your statement to listen, learn, and try. And thank you for sharing how you are doing that at Cisco. Number 2, I really admire how you are tying the purpose of your organization into the way you bring it along. So showing how the changes that you're making in talent acquisition are tied to the purpose and goals of the larger organization, and how your interviewers, your people in the business, have really embraced mandatory training because they see the role that talent acquisition is playing. So I think you're bringing everybody along with you. And third, sometimes we underestimate change management. Sometimes you have to create space for change. That resonates so much. And you shared that sometimes you have to tell people things 4 or 40 or 400 times for it to really sink in, and that's okay. We can't move too quickly in making some of these really big changes. Before I let you go, I just want to remind everybody that we have another Future Strong episode in 2 weeks when my wonderful co-host, Nicky Garcea, will be hopefully healed and back. We send Nicky our best. We're going to be welcoming Shoshana Goldberg, who's the Director of Public Education at Research at Human Rights Campaign. She'll be talking about job hunting and career management and recruiting for LGBTQ plus professionals. So with that, Zohra, thank you again so much for joining us, and I will give you the last word.
Thank you, Lindsey, and thank you, everyone. I really appreciate you listening to me today, and hopefully you take something out of this that helps you in your future careers and work and endeavors. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you again.